I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces, and I want to welcome you to today's roundtable session, which is artfully entitled Honors in the Time of Corona, a community conversation about teaching and learning strategies. I might add, during these unusual times. Those of you who have read John Z's excellent essay, which provides the framework for today's discussion, will understand the literary reference to the title. Those of you who haven't yet had a chance to read it will just have to take a look after our conversation to understand the allusion. We'll do a bit of throat clearing just for a minute to allow everyone to join the call, and then we'll get going with the formal session. So my name is Richard Bodenhausen. I'm the founding dean of the Honors College at Westminster College in Salt Lake City, where I've been for almost 2 decades. I'm also the immediate past president of NCHC, which means I get to give advice in meetings about how things were done in the olden days of 2019, which seems like a long time ago. I'm the chair of this year's board nominating committee. So if you've ever thought of running for the NCHC board or would like to nominate a colleague who you think would do a good job, I hope you'll reach out or see the materials on the NCHC website. And I'll post a link to those materials in the chat box in a minute. I'll be playing the role of facilitator and traffic cop today. I'll keep us moving along, follow the discussion on the chat board, and recognize people who have questions. And Mary Beth Rathy, our talented ED, will also be helping with that task. My partner today, John Zuby Zaretta, John Z, hardly needs any introduction for most of you, but I will have him say a few words about himself, his college, and his NCHC affiliations. John?
Thanks, Richard. I think most of you know who I am, but I am the director of the honors program at Columbia College, and I've been the director for, I think, 30 years, maybe a little bit more than that. But it's been the greatest thing that's happened to me in my career. And I've always been very, very interested in teaching and learning issues and strategies and solutions. And that's why, in addition to honors, I've also served as the director of faculty development at Columbia College for almost as long as I did, as I served as director of honors. So those twin trajectories always kept me really interested in how students learn and challenges that they face and how we teach and the challenges that we face as instructors. I am also a former president of NCHC and of the SRHC, and I'm currently the co-chair with Jim Ford of the Teaching and Learning Committee. So I'm delighted to be here. I had submitted a piece to the Honors in Practice Journal, and Richard immediately called me up and very wisely suggested that because so many of the things that I included in that essay and so many of the links are time sensitive given the COVID environment that we're in. He suggested that maybe instead we put it up as a white paper on the NCHC website with a link to it, and instead to have this opportunity to talk about what's in the white paper, some of the issues, some of the challenges that you all are facing out there. And trust me, I don't have answers from on high. I posted all those resources to show you, to share with you that many other faculty, especially in teaching and learning circles, faculty development circles, are struggling with the same issues. And so those resources are there. Many of them have multiple embedded links that you can go to provide strategies, alternatives that you can use in going remote, as they say now. And it does look like we're not getting out of this anytime really soon. So it's likely that those resources, I hope, will continue to be helpful throughout the next several months, if not years. And don't forget too, that a lot of those resources, they're time sensitive, yes, but many of them are strategies, solutions that you can turn to when we encounter similar situations, whether they be from, weather issues or earthquakes, all kinds of situations that result in that result in the disruption of business as usual. So they're still very valuable resources, and I hope you'll look at them and use them. So go ahead.
Thanks, John. And I really want to call out John's generosity for really turning around his article and agreeing to do this, and the national office for putting this up all in the span of a week. So a recorded version of today's roundtable will be available in the resources section of the NCHC website. And we'd also continue to encourage you to keep the conversation going on NCHC's social media and on the member social link. And you'll also receive a survey after the event. Please take a moment to share that feedback with us. For those of you just joining us, welcome. This virtual roundtable is entitled Honors in the Time of Corona, a community conversation about teaching and learning strategies. My name is Richard Bodenhaus, and I'm joined by John Zupa-Zaretta, and we look forward to hearing your creative ideas about managing these challenges that we're all facing as a community. A few housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted unless you're recognized to ask a question or make a comment. We had over 100 people register in advance for the session. You can ask a question or share resources on the chat board, or if you want to use the raise hand function, we'll look for you that way. We're going to break the discussion along the lines of the 4 major topics that John covered in his essay. I'll preview those topics now, and then at the start of each topic, we'll ask John to say a word or two about the subject before opening the floor for questions, comments. Those topics are retooling faculty approaches to teaching. The second one is addressing student access and success. The third is adapting capstone projects and presentations to online delivery and assessment. And then the final topic is adjusting grades, which of course are always a big factor in honors recruitment, retention, scholarships, and so on. So John, why don't you get us started by saying a word about the first topic, which is retooling faculty approaches to teaching in the light of our current circumstances.
Right. It's not a surprise that many faculty have been taken by surprise with the COVID pandemic. And when our institutions asked us all to take our courses online to a remote platform, many faculty had no experience teaching online. I know I've only taught 2 online courses, and there was a lot of disruption that upended really the ways in which we thought about instruction. And so all of a sudden, there were these tremendous calls for resources. What do I do? How do I do it? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure all of us experienced that at some point. Maybe we're still experiencing it. And, there doesn't seem to be any sign that this is going to stop anytime really soon. I know at my own institution, we were told by the new interim president who just started that the chances are 50-50 that we're going to continue online throughout the fall. And I know that some institutions have already declared absolutely that they're staying online throughout the fall semester. So, it's not going away anytime really soon. So one of the challenges in going online is, of course, the technology. What do we do as a faculty member? What platforms do I use? What's available? Who do I turn to help me with all this new ways of teaching? And another one is that faculty are accustomed to having close contact with students. And even, for example, having this Zoom meeting with you all, I see your faces. I love seeing your faces and interacting in this way. But I'm old. I'm prehistoric in some ways, and I really prefer the close contact that comes with face-to-face. So, I understand that a lot of faculty have been disrupted by this. And how to retool is a big issue, and it's been a big issue all through the networks in which I participate, the faculty development, teaching, learning networks. And that's where a lot of the resources came from that I shared in this white paper. And again, just to repeat, many of them will have application after COVID, and many of them have embedded links that take you to even further, more resources that you can use. So retooling is definitely something that has been a big issue. And I'm curious about maybe what your experiences have been. We'll cover these 4 topics one at a time. And, we want it to be interactive, not just answers coming from me, and because I don't have all the answers. Anyone want to share? Yeah, I see Betsy. Betsy, you need to unmute. There you go. Oh.
The initial question, hi Leslie, is how do dinosaurs use Zoom? But also I'm enjoying Jefford's cat coming in and out of the screen there. It's been relatively easy for me in that my course as a writing and discussion course transferred pretty easily to Zoom, and I had a very lively, responsive group to begin with this semester. I'm concerned about if we do go entirely online beginning in the semester, it's hard to establish, I think, as much body language and snark and immediate interaction. So that's my concern, would be, I wish there were ways that we could still have even sort of outdoors distance shouting parties or something. I don't know whether that would work until we know each other. So yeah.
What I would say about that is, and by the way, that comes up all the time, and to add even more complexity to what you pointed out, Betsy, how do we handle courses that are experiential, like studio courses, art studio, dance studio, science labs, a lot of concern about that. And in fact, in the white paper, one of the bullet points has a whole bunch of sub-bullet points that can point you to resources with ideas about how to handle those kinds of courses. So I hope the faculty who are in those disciplines will look at those. But the issue, I guess, that you're pointing to is one that also I'm very sensitive to, and that is the difference between interacting online and interacting face-to-face. And there are differences, and you mentioned a couple of them. You hinted at a couple of them, body language, snark. I mean, you can't really see that I'm sitting here with my knees pressed together because I'm nervous, So that's definitely a concern. But there are ways to leverage the advantages and the power of online communication to maintain community. I know, for example, in my courses, for years, I've been using an online threaded discussion in my classes. I use them in all my classes. I've talked about it at NCAC and SRIT conferences. And they've been very, very helpful, very important in the students' learning. And the students respond with lots of enthusiasm. So one of the things I would suggest, which has been suggested widely, is to develop, if you haven't already, a student survey so that you can communicate with students, ask them what works, what doesn't, what can we do, what can I do to facilitate your learning given the circumstances that we're living through. And they will give you remarkably insightful feedback and very specific things that you can do to help them. Things that, for example, I would never have thought about. some things are obvious, like
At Oklahoma State have been running some virtual pet therapy Zoom sessions. Even the sight of a furry friend, even if you cannot pet them, seems to be soothing and popular. On the point of community, John, I was wondering if you might maybe speak to this. We've noticed that some of the community building that has taken place in honors in all the ways that we're used to before we moved online has actually transferred online, in that some of the honors seminars are going better than the non-honors seminars because there's a foundation of community already present. It's not something you can just snap your fingers and say, we have community. But I was wondering, if you might speak to the resiliency maybe of honors community in this time.
No, I think that's absolutely a very important point. Has always been something to celebrate about honors, is that sure, honors is about academic excellence and all those things that we tout, but it's also about community. It's also about the commitments that the students have to each other and that they have to us and that we have to them. And that is a framework, if you will, for making what we have been needing to do lately more successful than perhaps not, or in other situations. Quick example, I was just telling Mary Beth and Richard before we started that just yesterday I had a Zoom meeting. It's amazing how Zoom has taken over our lives. But I had a Zoom meeting with honors alumni, and I was so touched that honor students from the very first graduating class, that for us, that was 1989, about half of that class logged in to participate in this Zoom meeting. And that's a testament, right, to the kind of community that Richard is talking about. And they participated in this Zoom meeting in a way that I think that our other students here at the college have not been participating in other efforts to bring them together. And it's because they already had the community that Richard is referring to.
Okay, as promised, I'm going to play traffic cop here and move us along. Just a reminder, those of you who don't have your chat window open might want to open it. One of the wonderful advantages of Zoom is we can have two parallel conversations taking place, and there's already some really nice conversation going on in the chat box about survey fatigue that our students experience, and some of the ways in which institutions have countered that. So I encourage you to keep those parallel conversations going on. John, the second topic is addressing student access and success, something that I know we're all concerned about. Wonder if you would just say a word about the importance of that topic, and then we can hear maybe for some people questions or how they've addressed it.
Yeah, I would be very interested in hearing from some of you about what you're doing in order to ensure student access to not the technology and the community that they need for this all to be successful. I know that in many cases across the nation, there's been a lot of concern about the way students are responding or not responding to the demands to go online. We have always assumed, I know I've been guilty of this, that our students are totally tech savvy. They're all, they know exactly what to do and how to do it, and they're so much better at it than we are, and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? That's not always true. In fact, I think it's sometimes largely true that that students aren't always prepared for this kind of environment in terms of their learning. And many of the students that we surveyed here at the college, that was also one of their main complaints, is that, this is not the way I learn, and this is a disadvantage to me, and I feel like I'm being punished and penalized, especially by faculty who are whose approach to online teaching is to ratchet up the amount of work, as if somehow that's going to make it better. So there are a lot of issues of access and fairness and equity here that are at stake for students. And again, there were a lot of resources that I shared in the white paper to help us with that. So I'm curious about what some of your campuses have been doing to address the issue of student access.
Yeah, you can either raise your hand visually, although we can't see you all. If you can use the participant list, you can raise your hand, or you can pose a question in chat. So you have 3 ways to do it. Christina has mentioned that many rural areas, including in Virginia, don't have access to internet. I think we make some false assumptions that everyone has access to simple things like Wi-Fi and internet.
Alan Culpepper has a question.
Okay.
I was just going to say that my college is doing something kind of odd, which is that we have a lot of students who have some sort of device for access, but don't actually have the Wi-Fi. And so what the college has done is actually expand its Wi-Fi network to most of the parking lots so that students can actually, drive into the parking lot and use the college's Wi-Fi, which is apparently working surprisingly well right now. Of course, by the time we get to summer and it's 105 degrees in Tulsa, that's probably not going to be so practical any longer. But I thought that was a creative way to try to address the problem a little bit, at least.
Excellent. And you're having a lot of public libraries around the country who are experiencing a similar sort of thing with a lot of students and adults parking near their signals to pull from them. I'm curious, another question in the chat board is the question of synchronous learning versus asynchronous learning. Synchronous learning for students who might have new family responsibilities, financial responsibilities, that's problematic. Of course, on the flip side, if students have a mix of asynchronous and synchronous responsibilities, that can be its own dilemma. John, do you have a thought about that?
No.
Okay.
But I got, but I got actually I got distracted by some of the chat. I noticed that Lori Goodling points out that her institution, and this is similar to what other institutions have done, have created new websites that focus on learning. And they're designed for students to use to help them through this period of time. And they have one that's just for students, for student learning. Michigan has one. Iowa has an excellent one. So lots of institutions now are beginning to design those websites to keep students active and engaged and successful.
Alan, you've jumped in on the synchronous asynchronous question by pointing out that a synchronous schedule can help students connect. Many students miss seeing the faces of their classmates and their professors if you go entirely asynchronous. Is that what you're doing at your institution?
Yes, I'm kind of doing it with my classes. I am doing an optional synchronous class meeting, which I have a group of about 5 or 6 students for each class who are regularly doing, and they say just that they want to see people's faces and just kind of want to check in. But a lot of students tell me what's really happened is that their schedules at home or their schedules at work, if they're still employed and that sort of thing, have changed so much that it's really not practical for them to be on at class time, and that's why I made it optional. I think the asynchronous works better, I think, for having a serious discussion that people need to reflect on their answers and that sort of thing. But I do find it useful just to kind of check in with people to have the option of the class meeting.
Thank you. Other questions on this question of access or success stories that people would like to share? Yeah, Christina?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've come to just respect or be aware of with the students is, regardless of institutional policies, that, you know, for some of their classes, they've gone from meeting in a class to being asynchronous, and others are or try to do synchronous and maybe adapting within the first couple of weeks. And, you know, my assumption may have been that, you know, it was all just moving online and would be the same time. But there's a lot more asynchronous than I expected there to be. And I've heard from students that, you know, time management, even for the seniors, or maybe especially for the seniors, and that there's this kind of, there's a lot of time and then there's very little time in that combination, and trying to help them sometimes even, you know, for the upperclassmen, you know, giving them the advice they gave the freshmen just a couple months ago in regards to time management, having a routine, scheduling things. The one thing I have heard from students is that their group projects seem to be doing better because there's not the extracurricular, co-curricular activities that would normally get in the way of 10 people getting together. Probably very much like this meeting.
You know, Christina, if I can add to what you just pointed out, the time issue. I know that in the national conversation about all these challenges, one of the themes has been students who feel like the professors in their courses have doubled up on the work that they're asking, and for a whole host of reasons, the students are running out of time. And now here it is at the end of the semester. I don't know where all of you are at, but this is our last week of classes, and students are absolutely just exploding. They're falling apart because all of a sudden, all these increased demands all at the same time that would not have happened if they'd have been here continuously, you know, on campus face-to-face, working on their projects and submitting their work on a schedule and so forth. And all of a sudden, they're just running out of time. And one of the suggestions that has come up, not just here, but elsewhere at other institutions, is students rallying together to sign petitions, asking if their semesters could be extended a week, let's say, so that they can use that extra time to do the work that they've been asked to do before the semester ends.
Yeah, and in reality, we lost a week in the transition. Probably many people did.
Yeah.
So Tara Tuttle has posted an interesting account in the chat about the extraordinary work that they're doing. I think Tara's from University of Kentucky. I mean, incredible outreach and posting content in a variety of different ways. It raises the question, what is reasonable to expect of faculty? And I'll invite Tara to comment on this. What is reasonable to expect of faculty, many of whom are teaching 3, 4, 5, even 6 courses, the demands that are being placed on their professional lives, in addition to having extraordinary demands in their own personal lives. So Tara, I was wondering if you wanted to address that question.
It is a little bit labor intensive, but I want to make sure that the students have options. I'm the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion for Lewis Honors College at the University of Kentucky. So we developed some guidelines for the pivot to remote instruction, being really mindful that a lot of our students might be from Eastern Kentucky and have limited access to reliable internet there. So I'm just trying to provide these additional options so that every student has some way of accessing the material. But I will echo what John said. I'm trying to keep the community together, and the Zoom session is really allowing us to do that. I'm very, very thrilled to be teaching honor students in this particular moment because they are showing up and coming together, and we're having some pretty good class sessions.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Louis, would you like to jump in on this question? Louis, you're muted still. Need to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, I find that the rhythm of life on campus is different from the rhythm of life online. And when I was teaching before I arrived at App State, that was probably one of the things I had to get used to, is that, and I'm trying to get used to it myself in my profession right now, working totally from home instead of just partially. There's a different rhythm. And I think trying to get used to that rhythm can really take a while for some students. That's what I've noticed in my courses, is that there's just very few who got with the rhythm of online right away and were able to respond pretty immediately. The others have not. And I've noticed that about myself. The days run in, like, Jeff, I was saying, I thought we had a staff meeting this morning and it's really tomorrow morning. And of course I'm like that anyway, but I'm just saying that there are certain rhythms that are different when you're working from home that we have to negotiate and mediate. One thing that I did that I think students are happy about, I gave the final earlier. It's a take home, and it was a take home anyway. So it worked out pretty well. That seems to lessen their stress. They now, if they were worried about time factor, I'm trying to take that out of the equation by giving them as much time as possible to finish really what I think meaningful assignments are in the class. So for me, I think it's a rhythm issue, largely on a macro level.
Yeah, I think these are all great ideas for us to keep in mind and remember, if and when, and I think it's probably going to be more when than if, we have to continue doing things remotely in the fall semester so that we can be ready to deal with the issues that you guys are talking about, rather than caught off guard. I mean, it is a miracle to me that things have worked as well as they have.
Yes.
Given that we were given 24 hours to take all of our courses online. And imagine what a faculty development catastrophe that was on our campus, because faculty development was eliminated a few years ago. So I can imagine how faculty everywhere were like, what do I do? So we need to be ready in the fall, because I think that a lot of us are still going to be online in the fall. And think about these time issues and the rhythms that you put it, Louis. I think excellent points.
Okay, the third issue is capstone projects, but since the chat room is hot on the topic of grades and pass-fail, why don't we jump ahead to the fourth topic, and that's adjusting grades. A number of people have pointed out the variety of approaches different institutions have taken, some of the challenges around accreditation issues,
Yes.
around confusion amongst students. And then we had a question in advance online, the distinction between making allowances and, quote, maintaining the academic integrity of the class. So John, do you want to maybe say a word or two about that, and then we'll open it up for comment or question?
Yeah, I know. I figured that would be one of the four that would draw lots of conversation. Indeed, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago or so, on the listservs that I read that have to do with teaching, learning, faculty development, instructional development, all of a sudden that became like the #1 issue because many institutions began to change their grading policies so that they moved to a satisfactory or unsatisfactory or pass-fail system, giving students options. I mean, there were many approaches. Some were just declared, and some offered students options. Meanwhile, of course, recognizing, as Richard has already intimated, that in honors, we have always been very, very tied to grades, students and us. scholarships, success in applying for graduate schools, med schools, etc. All kinds of grants sometimes require GPAs. So, you know, institutions have been struggling with how to address that, and at the same time still be fair. You know, Tara works with equity issues, right? And still trying to deal with those issues, you know, that this has completely changed the face of higher ed for faculty and for students. And many students are feeling like they're going down the tubes. So institutions have responded by offering the option of pass-fail that doesn't affect the cumulative GPA, and still is able to preserve financial aid credits. So there's a lot of complexity there, and I'm very curious, and I shared a lot of that in the resources in the paper, but I'm curious to see what your institutions are doing, because honors, this touches honors in a way that it doesn't necessarily touch other areas. Think about recruitment, for example, admission standards, retention standards. You know, how many of you have GPAs that students have to maintain? It's a big issue for us. What do you all think?
John, are you thinking about, I mean, talking in terms of admissions, are you just talking about how GPAs in high school might be affected, or are you also talking about the fact that we're going to have a senior class that has not yet had a chance to take standardized test scores? And even if, I mean, unless College Board and ACT get creative, that means that in the fall, I don't see any way they can make up for all those tests they canceled, especially if social distancing means they have to put fewer students into a room, and they get figured out how to even have more rooms. Yeah.
You know, I can use this as a quick plug for the NCHC forum, the social link or whatever it's called, I don't know. It's what replaced the listserv. It's you go to the members only link and you can go to it from there. But there was a conversation about that, as you know, and I forget his name, but he responded to say that the testing people have developed an online or remote way to take those SATs and so forth. I don't know much about that, but yeah, and the issue of GPA is on all those fronts. I mean, it's affecting high school students, and some high schools are going to a pass-fail system. And if it affects them, it's going to affect us, right? Because many of us, right, I think, still use GPA in our recruitment approaches. Not all, but I think most, probably. I'm just guessing. And it's going to affect retention because probably, again, most of us have standards that the students have to maintain in order to stay in the program or not go on probation. So it's going to affect us on a number of fronts, including the standardized testing, which some still use. I know a lot of institutions have gone away from that, but in programs and colleges, honors, but it's an issue that's pretty complicated.
John, one of the themes of your essay was that this crisis will present both risks and opportunities. And I'd be curious to ask the group if they feel like one of the opportunities is around the question of our practices around admission standards, depending on standardized test scores, but even our practices around grades. And if this crisis does not raise the question of, well, what are grades even for? And our typical approach is 2 grades in honors. Might it be time to interrogate even those practices? I'd be curious if anyone had thoughts on that question. There is a recent article in the JNCHC about this question of student self-grading. John's essay also raised the issue of specifications grading. It's quite a good book on that issue. And I'd be curious to hear anyone who's doing some innovative work with grading in honors. Yeah, Mary Gold?
Yeah, I think that grading is a challenge because we have outlined what our grading expectations were in our courses, but those were predicated upon that we would come together a lot of the time. And so one thing in particular that I needed to really think about and develop new practices around was participation and attendance grades, because we have to be really flexible with students in terms of what that means. What does participation and attendance mean? And in my college at the University of New Mexico, a lot of times we talk about having participation and attendance is often a relatively large portion of the grades, and certainly in my classes. And so I think in my class, one of the classes I'm teaching right now is 20%. But one of the things that I decided to do, and maybe others have some ideas about this, but one of the things that I decided to do was to try to figure out how to get students to tell me how they fair for me to grade participation. And this built upon something that we had done earlier in the class, which was to develop shared expectations for what participation and attendance and preparation for classes would look like. And so we just did another round of it, and it was a little bit more awkward and harder to do online, but students sort of all said what they thought participation and attendance should look like. And we came up with sort of, here's what we are expecting of each other. And then I just sort of made the decision that, okay, here are the expectations, which we all participated in developing. And then I decided that students are going to self-grade or self-assess on each of those 4 or 5 categories. But I actually told them that I would also keep track of everything, and they would receive whichever grade was higher, either their self-assessment or my grades, because I think actually self-assessment for especially our honor students who are so high achieving, sometimes they're harder on themselves than we are. But I think that for me, trying to figure out how to still invite students into the direction of the class is really important. That's something that is important in my classes for me. But figuring out how to be invitational to those students to help them direct and then also feel ownership over the class has been important. So that's how I've tried to do that, only with my participation grade, and maybe there are other ways that you could extend that to other parts of the grading.
Great, thank you so much. And the link to the JNCHC article that I posted covers some of this ground about self-assessment. One of the ethical issues is some of the data around that experiment showed that white male students overestimated their abilities, whereas women and students of color underestimated their achievement in the course, and the ethical obligation of the professor to step in, which would then blow up the entire exercise because the students were promised that their grade would stand. Louis, do you want to jump in on this topic?
Yeah, our dean, Jeff, has really encouraged us to ask the question is, how is honors different? And how do we do things differently? And it really kind of inspired me to do something I've done before, but a little bit more deliberately. And that's going back to the last person who talked, is do more self-assessment and group assessment. So in my religion and film course, they come up with the questions that they ask for journaling, meaning the person that's directing the discussion on the film each week comes up with a list of questions that every class member must answer in writing, and then they also assess it because they're the person in charge of that film discussion. And I found that they were taking, unfortunately, just at the time that we had to break because of the virus, they were taking more control of the classroom as a result. They felt, pretty much empowered to do what, and these are, a lot of them are juniors and they should be doing this. We should have kind of a developmental pattern toward them doing both self and group assessment. And so I think the question that we're asking ourselves in our college is, how are we different? We can use in almost every category of what we do in honors. How are we doing things differently than their experience in the undergraduate colleges that they're in? So I find that to be useful.
Great, thank you. So we have about 12 or so minutes left, so I want to get to the final question, which is the adapting of capstone projects, theses, and presentations to online delivery and assessment. John, do you just want to say a few framing words around that?
Yeah, just a couple of words. For some of us in certain disciplines, going remotely, going into remote mode in order to facilitate students contributing their projects is not a big deal. I mean, I'm in English. Student writes a thesis. She's going to be submitting it to me online anyway. So it's not such a big deal for me, but for some disciplines, again, maybe the arts, and certainly in the sciences where there may be hands-on experiential labs and so forth, that is a little bit more complicated. And again, in the paper, I listed a bunch of resources for how to approach those challenges, for students to be able to submit their work, but also assess their work, whether they assess each other or we assess it or a committee assesses it. And there were some pretty interesting approaches to celebrating honors projects at the end of the semester, using Zoom, for example, or some other platform, or even some other methods. And those are pretty much described in some of those links that I provided in the paper. But we all I think encourage, if not require, students to have capstone experiences, projects. And so the question is, how do we sustain celebrating them? How do we sustain assessing them? How do we use them if they're not being submitted in the traditional way? So again, the paper has lots of links to resources, but what are you all doing?
You're talking about in terms of supporting the students who are doing those research and creative experiences now.
Sure, go ahead, Rebecca.
We've been working really hard over the past couple of years to build up a resource framework on our, what they call the Honors Hub of Awareness, which is our D2L or chalkboard platform. So lots of best practices and scaffolding to support them in every step through that way. So they're really relying on that, and also maintaining the communication with with their mentors, to the point where there was even demand to have today. We're actually having a virtual undergraduate research symposium where they're presenting virtually through a box, and they seem to be craving these types of experiences. I know that on one hand, we're hearing students feel like they're stressed. On the other hand, I think it's a little bit because they might be lacking that structure that they had when they were here. And the students who are stepping forward and who are doing these research presentations or leading service honors gatherings or discussions online are the ones who are really thriving in this scenario. And people are reaching out on their own accord and saying thanks for the opportunities to keep some normalcy.
One of the nice things, thank you for sharing, Rebecca. One of the nice things about having that virtual content is that it gives you some content you can push out to prospective students to give them a sense of some of the exciting research that honor students are doing on campus. And depending on how much time you want to spend on this, of course, you can target it to incoming students' interests. So the students who's interested in medieval literature, you send them the link to the manuscript work, as opposed to the biology student working in the ocean. So a lot of, again, back to John's argument, a lot of opportunity around the crisis as well. There are other things that people are doing in terms of the capstone thesis, culminating celebrations of students, seniors. Certainly a sense of loss, I know, amongst many of our seniors who anticipated spending the last couple months on campus celebrating with their friends and their faculty and staff. And that's all gone.
I might mention that one of the links I provided in the paper is to what TCU, Texas Christian, is doing with their capstones. They're set up a very nice website with the students' photos and a little abstract of the work that they've done, and it's just just a nice way to celebrate and to maybe it isn't as warm and fuzzy and as meaningful as doing having a very face-to-face celebration, but it comes pretty close, and it is archivable and transferable. I mean, you can, as Richard says, you can use it as promotional material for your program or college, and you can use it to in recruitment. And I think it's a nice way to honor the students' work.
So I've become sort of an unofficial co-chair of our campus-wide efforts to figure out how to celebrate the accomplishments of our seniors. And one thing that was very clear from our seniors is that they wanted some type of recognition on the originally published date of graduation. And so we talked at great length with Senate and are doing a whole commencement virtually. And then for the medallion, we do an honors medallion ceremony. We're all three of the normal speakers that would come to that. We're still putting together a slide and verbiage about every single student with several pictures of each. And then the university is coordinating a campus-wide initiative to collect items that belong in a care package to graduates. So from honors, it'll be a letter from the dean's office. It will be the letter that they, as a freshman, wrote to their future honors selves. Copies of our full program for the medallion ceremony and also their medallion. So that's going to go out with anything else they're getting, whether it's stethoscopes or whether it's programs from the original commencement, and the students are really excited to get those.
Very nice.
Other thoughts around those year-end celebrations?
Peter Bradley has his hand up.
Yeah, Peter.
Thank you, Mary. I just wanted to say that we at Mideast Honors did our conference online in much the same way. And you can check it out. It's at mideasthonors.com, or sorry, mideasthonors.org. And if you follow the links for Conference 2020, not all the videos are up. We took down most. Few of the students said that we could leave their videos up. There's only about 5, but the abstracts are still there and you can see the comments. So it was all built out in WordPress. It's free. WordPress and YouTube, and you know, it's doing this asynchronously was a lot of fun, and the students really enjoyed it.
Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left. Are there topics that people would like to get on the table before we jump off the call? Yeah, Dina?
Dina. I'm in Michigan, and I have a question about community service. My college, we've had an honors program since the 1970s, and one of the cornerstones of my program is that students do community service. They do it in the spring, which completely fell apart this spring because most of my students did community service in schools or other organizations, which obviously shut down in March. My theme, of course, for the fall had tentatively been community service, which of course is now out the window. So I was wondering if folks had any suggestions or if they have resources or any other ideas for how I might bring the theme of community in an online community for the fall.
Dina, is what you're saying that the piece of it was that they were doing the service together? Because there's no reason they can't continue to do service. I mean, there are a lot of organizations that have published lists of ways to do service remotely, in a sense. But if it's what you're looking for as a bonding over service, then that is more of a challenge.
Yeah, so in the spring, they each had their own individual assignments that they chose, but most of them were in the schools. And then once the schools closed, then it was really impossible to kind of pick up. But yeah, the idea with the fall was that we were going to do as a program, a community service for some kind of program, for the community. So yeah, I was just looking for something that might supplement that in a way or replace it.
Betsy?
You might call it community as challenge and have the challenge be to research the this new world that we're in, because it is a new world. It's not the Spanish flu. They didn't have the resources that we do now. So it's a new structure that we're building here.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on community engagement? Okay, we're coming to, yeah, go ahead, Betsy.
Always establish a recipe folder. Everybody's home.
Well, we are coming to the bottom of the hour. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. John, Mary Beth, and I will hang around for a few minutes for those who'd like to continue the conversation. I'll give John a final word after I just say one word. I'd just like to echo Jennifer Schlegel's comment on the chat, which I really love and appreciate. The idea that, in this unprecedented time of disruption, I think a reflection on the disruption itself is an incredible opportunity for our students to realize that many human beings across the globe experience disruptions like this on a daily basis. It's just part of their existence, and so leaning into that to understand one's own privilege and have a little sympathy for people who are not as lucky to have the lives that we have, and create a little more empathy and problem solve. It is, as John's article says, an opportunity that comes out of crisis. John, do you want to say a final word?
No, just that, yeah, I do. In the essay, I think I remember I made the comment that for a long, long time, many of us always said that honors and distance learning were incompatible. And I believed that for a long time, but I don't believe that anymore. I think that Betsy's right. I mean, we're in a completely new world. It'll never be the same. Higher education has already seen and will continue to see gigantic changes. And we will never be able to teach, and students will never be able to learn in exactly the same way ever again. And so I'm proud that honors has come through, I think. And I know it has in my own specific case. Our honors students, our honors courses are going full steam ahead, quite successful. The feedback from them has been largely positive, whereas as I relayed earlier, the feedback from the rest of the student population here has been largely negative. So I'm proud of the students for coming through. I'm proud of the faculty that have really stretched And you all are just a testament to how honors tries always to be at the forefront of innovation and creativity. So good for you. The last thing I want to say is that remember that we do have the NCAC forum that's accessible from the members login link at the top of the page. And there's a lot of conversation that happens there. I think we're supposed to also say, Richard, or maybe am I on your turf, that there will be an assessment that'll be distributed after this so that you can chime in some of your feedback. What other things would you like to see NCHC do with these forums? And I'm sure that Mary Beth has got her ears wide open here listening for that feedback. So look out for that evaluation form.
All right, thank you all for your time and wonderful thoughts and your sense of community. As I say, John, Mary Beth, and I will just hang for a minute or two, and I wish you all the best. Be well and be safe.